My name is Audrey Sinclair. I'm 34 years old, and for nearly a decade, I was a freelance journalist based in Atlanta, writing lifestyle pieces and human interest stories that often filled the weekend sections of glossy magazines. People thought I had it all figured out: flexible hours, creative freedom, and a portfolio I could be proud of. But the truth was far simpler and sadder. I had always wanted to open a small bakery. That was the real dream. Kind with frosted windows and the smell of warm cinnamon drifting out onto the street at dawn. But life, as you know, rarely follows the script we write in our heads. It was raining hard that day. Not the soft, poetic kind of rain. This was relentless, drumming on the roof of my car, pouring down in sheets as I navigated downtown traffic. I was on my way to the law offices of Harper & Stone, and every mile felt heavier than the last. The windshield wipers screeched with every pass, struggling against the downpour, while my hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary. Outside, everything was blurred: red brake lights, gray skies, unfamiliar streets. Inside, I was battling a storm far worse. It wasn't just rain. It was the ache of uncertainty, quiet panic of what waited at the end of that drive. And beneath it all, a fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, something would change. If you're still listening, we want to sincerely thank you for spending your time with us. Truly means a lot. We'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments and let's see how far this message has reached. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, I highly recommend doing it now so you won't miss any of our upcoming stories. These aren't just ordinary stories, they're filled with meaningful life lessons that can inspire, teach, and stay with you long after the video ends. Hit that subscribe button and join our growing community. My mother-in-law, Eleanor Prescott, passed away just a few days ago. The city called her a philanthropist. She was the founder of a scholarship fund that supported underprivileged children's education, the kind of woman whose name graced gala invitations and award plaques. But to me, she was never about image. She was the only member of the Prescott family who made me feel truly seen. Though not my birth mother, Eleanor loved me like a daughter. She encouraged my dreams when others dismissed them as impractical. She once held my hand across a kitchen counter, flour on both our fingers, and said, "Don't ever let someone else's ambitions silence your own." So when the letter came, summoning me to the reading of her will, I felt no anticipation about inheritance or wealth. I wasn't there for property. I was there to say goodbye, to find a final piece of her in the words she left behind. Maybe even a trace of comfort. The rain had barely let up by the time I pulled into the parking lot of Harper & Stone. I stepped out, the wind catching the edge of my coat, rain soaking into the hem of my black dress, plastering it to my skin. My heels clicked against the wet stone path as I approached the steps of the firm, but then I froze. There, under the front awning, stood my husband, Eleanor Prescott, 38, chief financial officer of a rising tech startup in Midtown. Tailored suits, polished statements, and a confidence that always flirted with arrogance. Today was no exception. He looked like he had stepped out of a GQ photo shoot: gray designer suit, pocket square perfect, his dark blonde hair untouched by the weather. He was standing with one hand in his pocket, the other loosely resting at his side. Except he wasn't alone. Beside him stood Chloe Bennett, 25, an influencer who built her brand on sunlit selfies, curated vulnerability, and effortless charm. Her golden hair gleamed even in the overcast light. In her arms was a baby wrapped in a fur-lined blanket, one of those luxury brands you recognize even without the tag. The child couldn't have been more than a few months old. But I didn't need anyone to confirm it. I knew. I knew the way a woman knows in her bones. That was Ethan's child. He had never told me. Not in all the strange, unexplained business trips. Not after the late-night phone calls or the smell of unfamiliar perfume clinging to his collars. Not in the silence that grew between us like mold. I had suspected, yes. I had felt the shift, the slow unspooling of something that had once felt like a partnership. But to see them there, Chloe, Ethan, and their baby, like a completed puzzle I never knew I wasn't a piece of, it was a gut punch. Ethan glanced up and saw me. His jaw tightened, a flicker of recognition and maybe something else passed through his eyes. But he didn't look ashamed. He didn't even look surprised. Instead, his expression was flat, composed, almost bored. His eyes swept over me with a mixture of pity and quiet disdain, like I was the unfortunate reminder of a chapter he'd already closed. Chloe turned to see what had caught his attention. Her gaze traveled from my drenched hair to my soaked dress, and she smiled faintly just at the corner of her mouth like the moment was amusing. Then she leaned toward Ethan and whispered something. He didn't respond. She adjusted the baby in her arms with calculated ease as if to say, "Look what I have now." I should have turned around. I should have walked away, climbed back into my car, driven somewhere, anywhere else. But something rooted me to the spot. Maybe it was pride. Or grief. Or maybe it was Eleanor's voice echoing through the silence in my heart, telling me not to run. Telling me to stand tall. I straightened my back, fixed my gaze ahead, and walked past them without a word. Inside, the air was warm, thick with the scent of polished mahogany and aged paper. The law office exuded a kind of quiet reverence, a place where decisions were made and legacies secured. A receptionist greeted me in hushed tones and gestured toward the main conference room. James Harper, Eleanor's longtime attorney, stood by the door. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with neatly combed salt and pepper hair and a tailored navy suit. His face was calm, unreadable. "Mrs. Sinclair," he said, his voice deep but gentle. "We've been expecting you." I nodded, unsure if I could speak. He ushered me in. The room was lined with bookshelves and framed certificates, everything understated yet expensive. In the center stood a long table with high-backed leather chairs. Ethan and Chloe were already seated on one side. She cradled the baby like a precious prop. He leaned back in his chair, legs crossed, watching me without warmth. I took the seat across from them. Alone. The only sounds were the ticking of an antique wall clock and the rustling of paper as Mr. Harper opened a thick folder. He cleared his throat and spoke. "Today, we are gathered to read the last will and testament of Mrs. Eleanor Prescott." A silence followed, heavy with expectation. But I didn't care about the assets, the estate, or who would get the lake house in Vermont. I wanted to hear her words, to feel one last time that I mattered to her. Mr. Harper continued, his voice steady, his eyes scanning the document before him. But I barely heard the legal language. My mind was elsewhere, replaying Sunday afternoons in Eleanor's garden, her laughter as she handed me a cup of tea, the way she looked at me when I showed her the sketch of the bakery I dreamed of. She had said, "One day, Audrey. And when that day comes, I'll be your first customer." That was the kind of love I remembered. Quiet, constant. The kind that didn't need to be loud to be real. Across the table, Chloe shifted in her seat, rocking the baby gently, her diamond earrings catching the soft light. Ethan tapped his fingers against the armrest. Impatient. Let them wait, I thought. This moment wasn't theirs. It was mine. And Eleanor's. Mr. Harper began to read. Line by line, the list grew longer, so long I could hardly keep up. A luxury estate in the affluent Buckhead district. A working farm on the outskirts of Georgia. A portfolio of investment accounts totaling several $1 million. An art collection featuring works by renowned painters. And finally, a sapphire ring that had once belonged to Eleanor's grandmother, an heirloom passed down through generations of Prescott women. I could feel Chloe sit up straighter across the table. Her spine taut, her eyes gleaming, calculating, predatory. Ethan remained composed, but I saw his fingers curl around the carved wood armrest, his knuckles paling. They were both convinced of what would come next. Of course they were. Ethan, the only son, the golden boy, the blood heir. The one who bore the Prescott name. And me? I was the outsider. The betrayed wife. The inconvenient chapter he hadn't yet torn out. But then Mr. Harper paused. The tone of his voice shifted, softening just slightly as he glanced at the next section of the document. All of the aforementioned assets, he said slowly, are bequeathed to Mrs. Audrey Sinclair. Silence. Utter, complete silence. A beat passed, then another. Creak of Ethan's chair broke the stillness as he leaned back hard, as if someone had struck him across the face. Chloe's mouth fell open, a small gasp escaping as she clutched the baby closer to her chest. The child stirred in her arms, unsettled by the tension in the room. And me? I didn't move. I couldn't. I sat there, frozen, unsure if I had heard him correctly. Eleanor had left everything to me? I felt like the air had been pulled from my lungs. My vision swam, not from tears, but from disbelief. Why me? I was the woman her son had lied to, betrayed, discarded. But Eleanor had seen me. Even now, she still saw me. Ethan stood up suddenly, his voice sharp and tight with rage. "This is a mistake," he snapped. "My mother wouldn't have done this." She couldn't have. Chloe sprang to his side, her voice shrill. She was confused. She must have been. You said she was fading. You said we didn't have to worry. I watched them unravel, slowly, like fabric pulling apart at the seams. Harper, unfazed, responded calmly. This will was signed and notarized 6 weeks before Mrs. Prescott's passing. It is fully legal, and its authenticity has been verified. She was of sound mind and body at the time of its drafting. He flipped to the final page. She also made one final provision. Should Mrs. Sinclair decline the inheritance, the entirety of the estate will be donated to the Eleanor Prescott Educational Foundation. I swallowed. My hands trembled in my lap, out of view. I looked down for a moment, the weight of it all threatening to crush me. Then I lifted my head. I accept, I said quietly. My voice didn't waver. Ethan let out a strangled breath, somewhere between disbelief and fury. His jaw flexed, and his eyes searched mine for something. Remorse? Permission? Weakness? But I gave him none of it. Mr. Harper reached inside his folder again and drew out a sealed envelope. His hand was steady, but his voice caught slightly as he opened it. "There's a letter," he said, "from Mrs. Prescott. Addressed to you, Mrs. Sinclair." He cleared his throat and began to read aloud. "My dearest Audrey, thank you. Thank you for your patience, for your grace, and for loving me as if I were your own mother. I have known for some time about Ethan's betrayal, and yet you never once lost your dignity. You carried yourself with the quiet strength of someone who knows her worth, even when the world refuses to see it. I leave everything to you, not as punishment for Ethan, but as protection for you. This is not about revenge. It is about giving you the chance to begin again with security and freedom. You deserve both." Mr. Harper paused to turn the page, his tone growing firmer as he read on. "To my son, Ethan, I am disappointed. You were given every opportunity, every advantage, and yet you chose deceit. You betrayed a woman who stood by you, believed in you, and shared your burdens. My hope is that one day you will come to understand the value of loyalty, of truth, of love that asks for nothing but honesty in return." The letter ended there. Silence fell once more. But this time it wasn't stunned. It was heavy, final. Chloe shot to her feet, clutching the baby to her chest like a shield. "You said she adored you," she hissed at Ethan. "You said we would get everything. That she promised." She didn't wait for an answer. Her heels clacked violently across the wooden floor as she stormed out, her voice echoing behind her. "You said she loved you." The door slammed. And then, for the first time that day, Ethan looked at me, not with scorn, not with pity, but with something raw and almost frightened behind his eyes. "Audrey," he said softly. "Please, can we talk?" I stood. The chair whispered against the floor as I pushed it back. I met his gaze and held it, steady and unflinching. "No, Ethan," I said, my voice calm. "We have nothing left to say." I turned away. With every step toward the door, I felt lighter, as though some invisible weight I had carried for years had finally fallen away. When I stepped out of that room, I wasn't the same woman who had walked in. I wasn't the forgotten wife. I wasn't the quiet one left behind. I was Audrey Sinclair, and I was free. 1 month later, I left Atlanta. I packed what I needed, some books, Eleanor's handwritten recipes, the sapphire ring she had left me, and I drove north, chasing something I couldn't quite name. Maybe peace, maybe distance, or maybe just a place where the air didn't carry the echo of Ethan's betrayal. I arrived in a small town tucked into the folds of Vermont's hills. Willow Creek. Kind of town where the streets are lined with trees that blush in autumn, where strangers wave from porches, and where silence feels comforting, not lonely. I found an old storefront on Main Street. It had once been a bookstore, its windows dusty and its wooden floors worn from years of foot traffic. But there was something about it, a quiet soulfulness, like the building was waiting to come alive again. I bought it, and I named it The Haven. A bakery and cafe. A place to begin again. I painted the walls a soft cream with my own 2 hands, layered by the scent of drying paint and hope. I had the floors refinished, deep walnut, warm underfoot. A local carpenter, a kind man with calloused hands and a gentle smile, built me a custom oak pastry counter that curved like a soft wave. Every detail was a choice. Every touch an act of reclaiming. Each morning, before the sun rose fully, I baked. Buttery shortbread cookies, warm loaves of sourdough, cinnamon rolls that filled the air with sweetness. An apple pie, always apple pie, made from Eleanor's recipe. A golden, flaky crust. A filling rich with tart apples and fragrant with cinnamon. Every time I pulled one from the oven, I felt her with me. The Haven wasn't just a cafe. It became a part of me. My first customers were an elderly couple, the Millers. They sat by the window and held hands over steaming mugs of coffee, telling me about their travels to Maine and Italy and all the places they still dreamed of going. Then came the young mothers with toddlers and strollers, the college students escaping the campus library, the curious tourists just passing through. Faces became familiar. Strangers turned into names I knew. I learned their stories the way I once wrote them. I remembered who liked extra honey in their tea, who preferred their toast just a little burnt. Mia, a quiet 16-year-old, came in after school to do her homework by the fireplace, always ordering the same lemon scone. And Henry, a retired veteran with a limp and a sheepdog named Lou, came every Saturday without fail, rain or shine. He always ordered black coffee and brought Lou a biscuit. And slowly, quietly, I began to heal. I never spoke about Ethan. Not at first. Not to the Millers, not to Mia, not even to myself. But there were moments when I wiped down tables or kneaded dough, when the silence offered space to breathe, to remember without bitterness. Until one afternoon, I was polishing the front windows, the glass still streaked with late spring rain, when I saw a figure across the street. First, I didn't recognize him. His posture was different. His presence smaller. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes heavy. No Chloe. No baby. Just him. Ethan. He crossed the road slowly and stepped into the Haven, his shoes leaving faint tracks on the mat. "Audrey," he said. His voice was softer than I remembered. Hushed. Hesitant. "I'm sorry. I've lost everything. I just wanted to talk." I looked at him, the man who once made me question my worth. The man who stood beside another woman and let me walk into a room like I was invisible. And I felt nothing sharp. No anger. No pain. Just clarity. "No, Ethan," I said quietly. "You don't belong here. You don't belong in my life anymore." He didn't argue. Maybe he knew it too. He stood there for a few seconds as if waiting for something to change, for me to soften, for the past to bend, but it didn't. I walked to the door, opened it, and gestured for him to leave. He looked at me one last time. Then he stepped out into the pale sunlight, and just like that, he was gone. I turned back toward the counter and reached for a clean cloth. I wiped down the place where he had stood, not because it needed cleaning, but because I needed to erase the imprint, the trace, the ghost. Then I turned on the lights, flipped the sign back to open, and returned to the kitchen. There were pies to make, and a life to finish building. These days, each morning begins the same way. I unlock the front door of the Haven, flip the wooden sign to open, and breathe in the quiet promise of a new day. The air carries the scent of rising dough and butter slowly melting into sugar. The espresso machine hisses softly in the background, while a gentle jazz melody hums from the speakers above the counter, Miles Davis or Bill Evans, depending on my mood. The sunlight filters in through the tall windows, warm and golden, touching everything with a softness that still surprises me. This is my rhythm now. My life. My peace. I'm no longer the woman who tried so hard to please Ethan. No longer the version of myself that shrank to fit his expectations, who dimmed her light so he could shine more brightly. That woman lived in the shadows of someone else's ambition. She bit her tongue, second-guessed her instincts, and wore smiles like armor. She's gone now. I am Audrey Sinclair, the woman who bakes pies that make people close their eyes on the first bite. The woman who remembers her customers' stories, who knows which young mother likes a double shot of espresso and which retiree prefers her tea steeped exactly 4 minutes. I am the woman who rebuilt her life with bare hands and quiet determination. And perhaps most importantly, I am the woman who found peace not in perfection, but in presence. Eleanor didn't just leave me an inheritance. She left me a mirror. In her final act of love, she gave me more than property or wealth. She gave me the space to see myself clearly, to recognize the quiet strength I had carried all along. She once told me, as we sat on her back porch with flour on our hands and a pie cooling between us, "Power isn't always loud, Audrey. Sometimes it's in the way you keep showing up." I didn't understand what she meant at the time. Now I do. One afternoon, as the cafe buzzed softly with conversation and the clink of teaspoons in porcelain cups, a little girl wandered up to the counter. Her name was Lucy, maybe 6 or 7 years old, with tangled hair and paint smudges on her sleeves. She slid a napkin across the counter toward me, shy but proud. "I drew this for you," she said. I unfolded the napkin and stared at the sketch. 2 stick figures, one with long brown hair, the other shorter, stood hand in hand in front of the Haven. Above them arched a rainbow. The building was slightly crooked, and the proportions were all off. But it was beautiful. Lucy pointed to it. "That's you," she said, tapping one of the figures. "And that's me. Because this place feels safe." My throat tightened. I didn't know what to say at first. I just nodded, smiled, and whispered, "Thank you." After she left, I found a small wooden frame in the back closet and hung her drawing beside the front door. It's the first thing people see when they walk in. It's not perfect, ink smudged at the edges, colors bleeding through the paper, but it's honest. And for me, that's enough. Sometimes, when I lock up at night, I glance at that little drawing and realize just how far I've come. Not in miles. Not in dollars, but in self-worth, in peace. People think healing comes in big moments, in forgiveness, in justice, in revenge. But I've learned that it often comes quietly, in the way cinnamon fills a room, in the softness of a customer's thank you, in the strength it takes to say no to a man who once had power over your heart, and in the choice to believe that you are enough, even when the world tried to convince you otherwise. Eleanor saw that in me before I saw it in myself. She believed in me not as a wife, not as someone's daughter-in-law, but as Audrey. Her belief became the seed I planted here, in this cafe, on this street, in this little town that welcomed me like an old friend. I still wear her ring sometimes, not as a symbol of wealth or status, but as a reminder of her, of where I came from, and of the love that helped me grow. The love that said, "You are worthy," even when others fail to see it. So every morning I turn the key, open the door, and begin again. Not because I have to, 'cause I get to. 'Cause this life, this simple, quiet, honest life is mine. And finally, I'm home. 5 life lessons I learned after walking away from a life that was never mine. If someone told me a year ago that I would be running a quiet bakery in a sleepy Vermont town, alone but at peace, I would have laughed. Or cried. Or both. But sometimes life unravels, and in the wreckage, you find the truth you've been avoiding all along. Here are the 5 lessons I learned, not from books, not from anyone else, but from living through betrayal, grief, and finally, healing. When love should never cost you your identity. I spent too many years trying to be the perfect wife. I softened my voice. I set aside my own dreams to support Ethan's. I convinced myself that selflessness was noble, even as it slowly erased me. But real love doesn't ask you to become someone else. It holds space for your dreams, your strength, and your full truth. If you have to shrink to be loved, it's not love, it's control. Your peace is sacred, protect it. When I left Atlanta, I wasn't chasing a new life. I was escaping the noise, the lies, the pity, the pain. And in Willow Creek, I found something better than excitement. I found peace. Quiet mornings. Honest conversations. A rhythm that healed me slowly, one pie crust and coffee cup at a time. Peace isn't passive. It's powerful. It's worth building a life around. 3 boundaries are a way of saying, I matter. Ethan came back, months later, hollow-eyed and full of regret. And for a brief moment, I was tempted to comfort him. Old habits die hard. But I looked at the life I'd built, my customers, my cafe, my clarity, and I realized I matter. And I don't owe anyone access to my healing. Saying no to him wasn't cruel. It was kind to myself. For the greatest inheritance is belief. Eleanor's may have left me property and money, but what truly changed me was something deeper. She believed in me. Even when I didn't. She saw the woman behind the silence, behind the sacrifices. That belief became my compass. Taught me that the most meaningful legacy we can leave is how we make others feel about themselves. She gave me the space to become myself. 5. Healing isn't loud. It's quiet and ordinary. There wasn't one dramatic moment where I got over it. Healing looked like learning my regulars' names, repainting the bakery walls, listening to jazz as I folded dough. It was slow, sometimes invisible. But each little act was a vote for the person I was becoming. If you're healing right now, don't rush. You don't need fireworks. You just need to show up for yourself every day. If this story touched you, if you've ever felt lost, invisible, or not enough, I hope you know now, you are not alone. Like, share, and subscribe if Audrey's journey reminded you of your own or gave you the courage to begin again. And please remember this. You are not what someone else failed to see in you. You are who you choose to become, one strong, beautiful, honest step at a time.